Hello, everybody, and welcome to another day of Adobe Live. This is day 2. My name is James Bonanno, and I'll be your host today. And I am joined by the lovely Jessica Hirsch. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and thanks for everyone who's joining for day 2.
Day 2, yes. Very excited to be here. And for those that do not know, Jessica, Cheat Day Eats is her brand online. And yesterday we spent the better part of 2 hours looking at some beautiful mac and cheese that Jessica has created so wonderfully using Adobe Premiere Pro. And we will be going into a lot of details of how she created that, sort of the recap of yesterday. We're going to get into some masking, some more advanced methods in Premiere Pro. So I'm super excited to kind of let Jessica take it away. I do want to just address a few housekeeping things for those that are just joining the chat today. Welcome. And those that are joining the stream, if you have not seen day 1, head over to YouTube, the Adobe Creative YouTube, and check that out. And for those that will be tuning in today, head over to behance.net/Adobe Live to follow along and ask all of the questions, all of the things. We are really excited to have everyone here. That being said, that was a mouthful. Let's get into it, Jessica. What are we doing today? And maybe for those that are new to the chat today, maybe just give us a brief intro as you did so elegantly yesterday.
Thank you, James. So I'm Jessica. I am the content creator behind Cheat Day Eats. And on the screen here, you will see this is my Instagram, which is my main platform. I focus mainly on videos, and you'll see that there is a lot of food. So it's my experience in the kitchen and to restaurants all around the world. I love creating videos, and so I'm really excited to share my tips and tricks with you today. As you see here, this is something that we'll be discussing, which is something I newly introduced onto my feed. I don't know if it's going to play the music. Are you guys hearing that? So what you'll see really quickly is there are 3 of me because it was my birthday and I was celebrating, and I wanted to try 3 cakes because I don't think cake tasting should just be for weddings. Yeah. So I thought about how am I supposed to showcase this in a video? And that's kind of where the creative idea came from that. So I'm really excited to dive a little deeper into that. I'm a Sony photographer, and I'm super passionate about not only the filming videos myself, but the editing process. So I love to kind of see from all the way from A to Z and how it comes together. And so I'm excited to share.
Awesome. Yeah. For those that are just joining the chat, hi, Frank. Hi, Voodoo Val. Welcome,
guys,
Wade.
Voodoo Val, remember from yesterday.
Voodoo Val's the best. Wade, it's good to see everybody in the chat. And please ask as many questions as you can today. I know we had a really engaged chat yesterday. A few things that Jessica, went over in Premiere was really the process of you creating these videos from start to finish. So you're not only creating the pre-production and the shot list behind what you do, but you're also cooking the dishes, right?
Yes, and cleaning them too. So luckily I have a partner who helps with that. But on the brand side of things, we have Instagram as our main platform. But if you want to see a longer format video, which you'll be either in a destination or maybe it's a full market experience, I have a YouTube. And then even a shorter format would be TikTok. I have It's My Cheat Day, which is a restaurant review. And then I also have a website where you could find a lot of the recipes that we create. So there's, and back to the chat.
Oh. I had a question for you, actually. This is not in the chat, but just for me nerding out as a foodie myself. Do you have any future plans of opening up your own restaurant, or is that something that you'll just visit people and other restaurants for?
I let other people do the work. I would love to do collaborations of some sort. And I think we will definitely start to dabble in that a little bit. But I know I work with so many, restaurateurs, and I know how challenging it is on that side of things. And I never want to be tied down to have to kind of run something like that, because it's a whole other ball game.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
But that would be really cool. I've always imagined it, but I want someone else to run that. And I can just come up with the creative ideas. And as much as I do recipes at home, to replicate it and create multiple is a whole other world.
I know. The idea of owning a restaurant sounds better than probably what it is in reality. So what you're doing is your own form of that.
Yeah, but I would love to share, like I really devoted these last few months to trying to like find the perfect cookie cake recipe. And still have not found it, but like it's amazing how challenging something like that could be. And then imagining having to replicate that and serve like hundreds, like I commend people for the ones who do it.
Yeah, absolutely. They're on their feet pretty much like 18 hours a day. So
yeah. But I'm excited for everyone in the chat. Feel free to ask questions. I'm excited to answer them, and we're a community here, so
absolutely.
Feel free.
Well, let's maybe go into just a quick little recap, Jessica, of what you worked on yesterday. Maybe we can show that video, and while it's up, maybe show those of us that are here how you would export this specific video for Instagram and for TikTok, and then we can kind of move on to some of the more advanced masking techniques you have.
Okay. So this is what we worked on yesterday. We really went through the process that I go to, like from like, the planning stages all the way to the editing. And then obviously exporting being the last, because there's honestly nothing worse than doing all of that work and then your video doesn't play well, or there's, like fragments in it, or, you upload it to Instagram and it's blurry. There's a lot of challenges when it comes to creating content with such actually high quality product, and then you upload it to something that isn't. There's, sometimes you run into a little bit of an issue. So finding that perfect balance is something that I think we have worked on and we have found it. So there's always like little tips and tricks as far as that goes. Do we want to play it on your end?
Sure. Yeah. Let's maybe cue that up, and those at home watching can see the final finished product.
All right, so for those of you who missed yesterday, this is a mac and cheese cake, and the idea came from the cheese blocks hitting and those giant Costco-sized cheese blocks. But so once we got through the video, all of the music was queued up and edited. Exporting is the last step. So Control M gets me to my export settings. I do have a few presets, but I do want to note something that you can use the drop down, and actually one of the things I kind of like rotate between, and it also depends on where the video is going, right? Whether it be a website or social media. For me, it's going on Instagram, and one of the most important things to note is that I film in 4K, but I'm exporting and my timeline is in 1080p. So it's different than what I'm actually shooting in, and that's important in a few of the settings. So here you actually have adaptive high bit rate, and what that is important to note is that the program's actually deciding what your bit rate's going to be, which is kind of all the way down here. A lot of the things I leave the same, to be honest. Like, what's there, I don't really touch. Like, for me, the audio, the other captions, like, it's very rare that I'm including captions on my Instagram. And that's something that, like, for example, Reels has like the option where you could just like kind of add it up right on. Like that might be something I would do on the app.
Right.
So I don't really use captions too often, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever actually used that function but I guess you could, right? Like if you didn't, and this is, I'm just curious, like if you didn't want to add a caption to a reel or to an Instagram, would you be able to do that and then publish it to those platforms right here through Premiere? Or
yes, you can, but I usually don't. And I actually recently created for a brand like captions on the TikTok, and I had you just have to like embed it on there, which is something that like I missed the first time. So it's you have to pay attention because it's actually on the video when you're looking at it on the preview. But then if you go to export and you don't burn on the captions, they won't be there in the video. So that's a little note that I learned.
Interesting.
Yes. So for the video, one of the things you're going to know is that it says the bitrate encoding. Some people choose one pass. And there's a lot of things that when it comes to the export settings that it's a matter of like timing. Like a lot of people want things that are happening fast. For me, I'd rather have a higher, like clear video and go through 2-pass, which just, if nothing's going to change from 2-pass to 1-pass when you're looking at the estimated file size. So you'll notice that it's right now 39 megabytes. If I go to 2-pass, it stays the same. It's just going through a second pass to make sure it's like super detailed and through its bit rate. So sometimes I set it myself, but if I went to the adaptive high bit rate, let's see what it brings it to. So it's analyzing what it thinks it should do. So 13, right? So I can just choose 2-pass. And like I said, I don't mind the video size being 39. For me, you know, obviously I'm creating Instagram videos and they're going to be like this, but it's not like a YouTube video. So I'm not like constantly producing YouTube videos, which are super long. Then that would start to get a little cumbersome when it comes to like my, you know, hard drives and such.
Right.
I'm
and
sure
I guess
you run into.
Yeah, well, that's definitely, I think this is a kind of like a nerdy but interesting part of the whole process, even though some people might be like, oh, the export, like, I want to just learn how to edit the video. This is so important, as you said, because not only are you exporting for you like your page personally, but a lot of the times we're exporting and you're exporting for clients. And so sometimes you want to give a rough cut to a client that's not going to take that and use it as a final. And in that case, you might want to send them a lower, like a medium bit rate or something set so that it's not the final finished piece. I guess my question for you is, do you like for us for YouTube, I'm constantly exporting a 4K higher resolution video because YouTube compresses it just compresses it and I hate that. So I export something larger. And so you don't find that that's the case for Instagram typically?
Well, it's still pretty large, to be honest, for Instagram. But yeah, and so Instagram doesn't accept 4K. So at least I'm like starting off with a 4K, and because I'm going to 1080, I feel like I'm still getting like those crisp, beautiful videos, and then I'm bringing it down a little bit. Otherwise, Instagram's gonna like crush it completely.
Gotcha.
And it's been like a process, like trying to find that perfect balance. And for example, I mentioned yesterday, if you missed it, that sometimes I'll have a cover photo in the beginning of my video, and it's just like one frame. And there's 2 reasons for that. It's one, it's like a polished look for my profile. And the other reason is there's a glitch on Instagram and it doesn't let me choose my cover photo for some reason. That's a personal thing. I don't know if that's happening with anyone else, but
yeah, that seems to happen on our end too. And I don't know why they haven't changed that yet, but eventually maybe they'll get their act together and do that. But for now, that's a quick hack.
I'm glad I'm not alone on that. Cause like sometimes I will converse with other like influencers and they're like, no, we don't have that issue. And I'm like, I don't know why my phone or my, app's doing that. But I still think it's great because it kind of forces me to think about like that cover shot and make sure I like get the photo also. And if I am using a photo and not just like a screenshot from my video, which you can do, and I could show how to use that too.
Sure.
Is that we've realized that if the file of the video of the photo is too high, it also kind of compresses it too much and it doesn't like match up with the rest of the video. So you have to like actually export it to be a 1080 by 1350 aspect ratio of the photo.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
That's something that we found.
Well, that's like a bit of a something that I've been running into too with Instagram Reels is I think in Instagram video, you would export it as a 4:5, right? So 1080 by 1350. But if you want the reel to play the whole vertical screen, you would want to export it at 1080 by 1920, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I edited it like that. So like I always have like a separate sequence and I'll just like throw it in there, readjust it, export it like that. And also same thing, I will make sure that my cover photo is also taking up that whole entire frame. I think when it comes to social media, like you always want to try to think about that aspect ratio that is preferable and utilize that. And I know that's not the case for everyone. So for example, if you're shooting for YouTube and you have all this like wide footage and you want to, post something that makes the most sense that way, then like, I feel like it's unique and that's fine. But like in general, I feel like that's probably the rule.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for those that are just joining us today, that's something that if you guys want to go back and watch the other video, but a huge topic that we discussed yesterday was really making sure that your aspect ratio and your formatting for the platform you're going to post it to, right? Like YouTube, you're going to want to see something that's 16:9 or even larger. And for a lot of these shorter form videos, not that there's any less production value, the production quality is just the same. It's just a matter of how you format it to fit that platform.
Yeah, and I personally believe, like, as the viewer, if I see something that's a 4:5, let's say on TikTok, it's just not visually as pleasing.
Right.
Like it just seems like there's dead space, and that's not like something that catches the eye, and or maybe it does in a bad way.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's deliberate. And like we were discussing yesterday, I think you need to. You need a second, less than a second, to really capture somebody's attention. And if there's something off about that, and the viewer knows, oh, what is this? What did this creator choose not to do? They're going to just continue to scroll through, and they may not actually watch the video that you spent all this time creating. So that's equally as important.
Yeah. And when I kind of brushed over this, but H.264, you can customize your presets if you want to, like, you find your perfect balance. That's what's great about like Premiere Pro. Like there's always these presets that you can do, like, to cut down your time, so you don't have to go through this process every single time that you want to export something, right? So usually this is like a 2-second thing for me. Like I said, I usually do 2-pass and it doesn't seem to take that long, but obviously that's like relevant to like the computer you're using and how many files are on there, and all of that information kind of goes into how long it's going to take to export. So I actually use maximum render quality, and that's because I shoot in 4K, but I'm exporting in 1080. So it just keeps the detail.
Got it.
And then I'll export it, which I'm not going to do right now. And if you have multiple things that you're exporting and you want to keep working in Premiere, you can use the queue, and that'll just queue it up in a different program, and you could keep working. So there's lots of ways that, you can maximize your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't it? I just think it's so crazy, in even looking at the file size of this video, like how far technology has come, and just how far to think that we can create these videos at 40 megabytes and up and have them on your phone, and then just upload them and airdrop them to yourself. Like I have probably 200 gigs of out of space. And so like it's incredible that the technology has allowed us to be able to create content like this and very easily just drop it in and out.
So I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I have a Samsung, so I'm not like Mac and iPhone, so I can't airdrop anything to myself. So I do want to say how I use how I get it to my phone. I actually drop everything in Google Drive, and then I download it to my phone. And for me, I like that because I feel like it's in multiple places. So I'm like, I'm never going to lose it, and that's just kind of how I also communicate with a lot of my clients. So I kind of create these folders for people.
Nice. Yeah. I forgot that for a second. I'm just speaking as a Mac guy. And I'm like, I don't even know that world, but I do the same thing when it comes to client sharing and things like that, G Drive. And
honestly, helpful. I'm kind of jealous. I feel like that's a great way. It just seems so instant, which is nice.
When it's working, it is. Sometimes it doesn't.
So awesome. That is my export settings. If anyone has any questions regarding that. And like I said, a lot of the things that I do are, me also looking and researching what other people are doing. And I think that there's a lot of information out there, right? So I always go to like a trusted source and see what other people are doing. And like you could have two amazing creators and they're doing something totally different. So you kind of just got to test it out sometimes and see what works.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, and it's really where you're kind of picking information from all these different places, and you use what you need at the moment. I find that I gather information when I need it, like that day, and then that sticks. And like your example of putting a frame of a photo in for that first half second of your video, so that's the thumbnail. That's something that I've been doing for, I don't know, the last 2 years, but I learned that from another creator who had explained why they do that too. So it does kind of roll on down the line, and hopefully those that are tuned in today and will watch the video afterwards will maybe gather some new information as well of how to export their videos.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad. I think Instagram had kind of forced me into this with the photo thing, but I think it works out, because when it comes to, I think I mentioned this yesterday too, I absolutely love like video storytelling that sometimes I'm like, wait, I didn't even take a photo. So it kind of makes me like stop and think like cover shot, like what's this photo if I don't, get it in the video itself.
Right.
So I'm just gonna X out of this and I will just show you really quickly. Let's say I wanted to get like a Control-Shift-E. It's gonna bring up this window and it's export, and you can choose what file you want, JPEG. Sometimes I do PNG and then I'll just edit a little bit more. The PNG seems to be a bigger file and then I'll edit it down. And that, like, for example, if I forgot to take a photo, then that allows me to capture something. And obviously I mentioned yesterday, and for those of you joining, that I'm filming in 4K 60 or 4K 120. So I have a pretty high file here that I'm working with. So when I take the screenshot, it's pretty clear.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great function too.
And you could import it into the project, or you could just save it to your computer and, edit it a little bit and then throw it into the beginning.
Awesome. I actually use this function a lot for, like if I'm creating title cards over something else. So a lot of the travel films I'll create maybe like a chapter marker. And so if I didn't have a clip long enough, or I maybe cut it too early, I'll take that last frame and I'll actually do this exact process where I export it as a still, and then I'll just put it next to each other. So it sort of seems like a seamless,
that's cool.
The still came after. And I've done that a couple of times. Just it's more of like a hack fix because I didn't do something right the first time. But it is another way to use this screenshot tool.
Yeah, I love a good hack.
Love a good hack.
I feel like that's what this is about, right? I mean, hopefully we'll get some hacks. And if anyone has any hacks in the chat, let me know, because I think that's always a great thing to share. Please, I learn from others.
Please do. Absolutely.
All right, so that was this project. If there's no questions on this one, did we cover all that?
We covered it. If anybody has any questions in the chat, we can always come back to addressing some of those. But let's maybe move on to the next part and kind of dive into what we're going to be working on.
Okay, let's make sure we get the right one here. All right, so one of the things that I recently started to integrate as far as my content goes, I think when it comes to being a content creator, you're always trying to think about like what's next. Like, how do I make my content more exciting? Like, how do I keep up with the trends? And one of the things I wanted to do and that I saw other creators doing was like duplicating themselves. And I've seen it before and I wanted to do it. And I think like it has to be done in a way that feels authentic and makes sense. And I never really saw anyone doing it in the food space. So I wanted to kind of like bring my personality and element into it. So the first one was the cake video that I showed you before. And should I play that first? Or did you guys see it?
Yeah, if anyone, I think maybe play it again I know we have a lot more people joining here.
It's coming up a little bit pixelated on my end.
Oh, very cool. I do want to address a few questions that we're getting in the chat here. Armando, welcome, and Fergie, welcome as well. Armando is asking, is there a reference list about the best bit rates to export on different situations? I think that's a great question. Before we move on to this, maybe to address what we were just working on. If you can chime in on that, Jessica.
So can you ask it again?
Is there a reference list or I think that Armando is wondering about the best bit rates to export on different situations. And so maybe you can just kind of go over that real quick.
I would say, like, I don't have them off the top of my head. I know for YouTube, it depends on if you're exporting at 4K versus 1080, how long your video is. So I think there's a lot of information that goes into it. And I'm not sure if there's a specific guide, but I've heard a few people talking about it on YouTube as far as like what they suggest. So if anyone knows of a specific guide that's like an exact information, I would love to know myself.
Yeah, me too. I don't have that information off the top of my head either. I just know, I've always kind of believed that like the higher bit rate, you can't really go wrong other than the file size. So if you have hard drive space to burn, or you can upload it in the cloud, like I'm at the belief of exporting something a little bit higher so that, let's say you lose a project down the line, which hopefully doesn't happen, you still have some finished project that's as high quality as possible. But yeah, for those in the chat, if you guys have that information, what bitrate would you recommend on a 1080 or 4K? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and I think from my research, I've never came across anything that, as far as a guide, except someone just recommending what like they think like numbers should be around.
Got it. Okay.
And
cool.
And definitely a lot higher for YouTube usually.
Yeah, err on the side of over export your bitrate on YouTube because they will compress it. So just keep that in mind with most of these platforms. I made the mistake of exporting a lot of 1080 projects back in the day, and I look back at them now and I'm like, oh my God, that footage looks so much better on my computer. Why does it not look like that on YouTube? So definitely keep that in mind for those exporting for YouTube.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, obviously Instagram doesn't even have 4K. I wonder if it'll move to that.
Right.
But I don't know. So the cake video was a concept I came up with because it was my birthday and I wanted to, try different cakes. And I was like, well, instead of making like 3 separate videos, it'd be fun if I'm doing it all in one, because
very cool.
I love cake. So I was like, how else can I do this? And I thought about, first of all, the cake idea, I kind of ran into a little bit of trouble, and I'm actually going to get to that and why I ran into trouble and how I worked around it, so that if you run into that issue, you won't have that problem. That being said, a lot of my videos are very immersed and close up. So I think that I always try to like fit a lot into a little space. And there is some dead space here, and this is my apartment. And I actually, in one of the concepts I did, and I filmed this the other day, I had another third me in the back. But
oh wow,
there's a few things you're going to want to do when you're coming up with the idea. That's pre-production, getting to Adobe Premiere Pro. And that is manually set your exposure. I've learned this the hard way. I shoot with natural light, and I have a lot of light coming into my apartment, which is amazing. But I actually ended up having to pull down all the blinds to kind of create almost like a consistent cloud. And so if you're working with artificial light, you'll have a lot easier of an issue, and just set your exposure and your f-stop, right? Because you don't want to be, especially if I was at a different distance from the camera and one felt like it was like, had a little bit more bokeh than another, then it would all of a sudden throw off the entire video with the different focal lengths. So you want to be very careful with that and set those before. And also, one of the most important things is having it on a tripod just makes it easier. I'm sure you could do it without it. But you're going to see this and you're gonna be like, wow, this is actually extremely easy, right? So tripod, make sure all of your settings are the same. Then you're still going to have a little things to tweak here and there, but for the most part, that made this really easy. So once again, I think you want to think about what is the concept. And for me, I was thinking like, what do people always ask me? And it's like sweet or savory. So it's just like a simple concept of it between like popcorn or like candy if you're like watching a movie.
Oh, which one do I pick? Who in the chat?
You don't.
What would you guys?
Pick, yeah.
What you don't pick? If you had to choose though, who would choose popcorn and who would choose candy? I think I would just find a way to smuggle the candy into the popcorn.
Oh, yeah, I would too. Actually, I love a sweet and savory. So I wanted to, this is kind of like a little bit of the finished product, and I'm going to get to that, but I'm going to actually start from the beginning. And I'm going to show you, since I didn't show this the other day, in case anyone wants to see a different way. The other day I was mentioning that I like to like throw all of my videos into the timeline. And in this case, I'm not going to. So I actually recorded this, like I said, multiple times until I kind of figured out exactly what I wanted. I changed in and out of both outfits like 10 times.
Oh my God.
So I really like learned the hard way, but then you learn next time, So here are my two selves, and I don't need the whole clip. So we can scrub through here. And here I'm like, yay, I'm hugging all my candy. And then you really want to match it up. And so I'm kind of throwing the candy into my mouth. And so you could just drag, actually really cool, just the video straight on. So you'll notice once again, my video is shot in 4K. So when I look at it in my effects, it's at 100 and I just zoom it in. So I'm just going to zoom it into 50. And I'm actually right now looking at a 4x5 and I shoot at a 9x16. So I'm just going to like bring this up a little bit so that I'm kind of like in the middle of the frame. It seems nice and even. You can see my cute little slippers. I love a theme. So here we are, we're having movie night, and now let's go to my next self.
I love that you've really thought through all the little details too. You know, it's easy to get hung up in like, okay, I want to do this. I want this idea and this masking idea, but you've thought of the colors that, you know, are complementing each other really well. I was definitely going to comment on those slippers and the outfits of, you know, these different selves. So you've had some fun with the storytelling aspect of this for sure.
Yeah. And I think you guys kind of have so much fun with it, right? So like you can talk to yourself, but you just have to make sure you kind of like give little appropriate pauses. Like if I was like, hey, Jessica, like sweet or savory, like, and then I'd be like, I like both, you know, like, or my original idea was having a third person in the back, like sweet or savory. And then I would have my two selves. So you could have a lot of fun with it. It's the basic concept that you want to like make sure you get down right before you get into that. So my sweet self was like kind of more colorful, and I had the M&Ms and such. And then here is my salty self. So I had to get onto the couch, and I really made sure to leave a decent amount of room between like my other self, my sweet self.
And would you do that for the purpose of being able to mask so that you don't want to bleed into the other self, right? Like, so you want to have that space in between.
Right. So when you guys are thinking about creating a clone, you want to make sure that your masking process is pretty simple. And that's what I'm ensuring by making sure that my two selves are pretty far and not going to interact with each other. My original idea was that I had lots of ideas, as you can hear, but I was gonna like throw the popcorn into my other self's mouth. And I'm like, this is gonna be an editing nightmare. So it's totally doable, but a lot more of a challenge. And I will definitely challenge myself to do it, just not yet.
I think if it's
live
one
stream.
No, yeah, we'd be here for a while, which is totally fine. But I think if you just did like one kernel, maybe it's not as hard. But like if you threw a whole handful, then you would be there for a long time masking that out.
But I was thinking like, yeah, it's like you would have to mask the little kernel moving.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I'll do it one day. So here's my other self. And so you can scrub through here. I knew I wanted to kind of start it when I started throwing popcorn into my own mouth. Of course, I kept missing. So let's say this is good. Bring it down. And I'm going to copy these settings here that I have for my first self and paste it here. Make sure motion is selected. And I'm not going to be using the sounds. I'm just going to delete that. I don't want to see it or hear it.
Can you just show people the quick shortcut to unlink the video and audio track together for those that are new to using Premiere? That's probably one of my favorite tools.
So you can right click and then unlink it. And then there we go.
Very helpful.
Was that too fast?
No, that's perfect.
I tend to do things too fast. So if I do, okay, guys, let me know. I'm happy to slow down. All right. So now, and I did that kind of a backwards way. I just locked V1 and selected the bottom, and that works also. Right. But either way, and that's what's great too. I feel like in Premiere, there's so many different ways to get to an end point, right? And I feel like a lot of people utilize kind of something what I was talking about yesterday, like the different keys that you can use and how you utilize it. Sometimes I find that I do things like kind of backwards, but like it works for me, like then it works, you know?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Whatever makes your workflow fastest.
Totally. Yeah, that's the beauty of really all these Adobe products, and Premiere being one of them. I mean, you do things a little bit differently than I might do them, but they both, have the same result, and they're efficient for you and they're efficient for me. So it really is a preference, which I think is amazing.
One thing, if you were just looking at the screen, you're going to notice that I have my saves on every like 5 minutes, and that's just so I don't lose my work. And I even feel like Control S is me saving my project, and I'll like find I do that all the time too, even though like my saves are on every 5 minutes. But if you're a fast editor, like, you're going to be, or you find that in 5 minutes, if you lost that, it's like,
yeah. And sometimes it's those like 5 minutes that you just broke through the creative threshold. You're like, oh my God, those 5 minutes, like I just did an entire sequence that's going to take me the whole day to do again. Yeah.
So you definitely want to make sure that in your preferences, there's a auto save I guess I could go. Should I go to it or should I finish what I'm doing? We can get to that. Remind me.
Yeah, let's keep going. I do have one question. This Fergie has a question, and Fergie, we actually were just addressing this, but they want to know, is it possible to take a photo of a piece of popcorn and have it travel on a path from U number 1 to U number 2, which is what we were just talking about. And it is possible.
Yeah, it's just a lot of work. I think whenever you're adding another element of something, especially moving, there's going to be a lot of masking. And yeah, I think that would be even more challenging than having a real piece of popcorn. Because I think like having the actual popcorn from one person to the other might be a better method. And what I would have my partner do would be throwing something into my mouth so I could get like at least that last second that's like, you know, me doing the action. Because I feel like you kind of need it to like have that finishing part too.
Right. And I think it probably, if you really were serious about doing that, it would be a little bit easier to go into Adobe After Effects and do that. I think when you get into more detailed, like masking frame by frame, I find that After Effects just has some more flexibility in doing that. So yes, to answer your question, Fergie, you can certainly do that. I mean, your creative ideas are endless. It just might take a little bit longer.
Yeah, I agree. So here I actually took my one clip and brought it over to the other. And if you use the toggle the eye, you'll see there I am on both sides. So I find that it doesn't really matter when you're in a circumstance like this, as far as which one you put on top of each other. So what I'm going to do now is create a mask. Okay, so you're going to look at opacity, and there's 3 different tools that you can use to help create, and that's dependent on your scene. So in this situation, I can really use any of them and probably make it work, just because I did create enough space between my 2 selves. And honestly, they're all pretty flexible as far as like creating different points within them. So I'm just going to drag this here. And as I do it, you're noticing that wherever I drag it, it's starting to reveal the other self, right? So the other clip.
Right.
And I did say,
that's why it's so important, as you can see there, in you dragging it for your lighting to be consistent. Because let's say your right self was shot with the natural light when it was a little shady, but then the left self, there was sun coming in, you'd have a really tough time getting those to match.
Yeah. And even still, while I filmed both of these with the set exposure, you'll notice that my salty self on the right is a little bit darker. And I'm going to show you how to fix that with a really easy step. So right now I have the mask there. I think that seems pretty good, but I'm just going to play it. So I'm just going to put so it's start of the play, start of my clip. And then you can see it's pretty harsh, right? So how can I fix that? So you're going to want to come over to all of the things that you see here under mask, and you're going to choose mask path if you wanted it to move, or opacity, expansion. And I'm just going to bring up the feathering a little bit, and that's just going to soften that line. Sounds exactly what it does, right? So it's softening the line a little bit. So let's try it again. Much better, right? Right off the bat. So just by that simple one, and I'll actually expand it. When you expand it a little bit, you want to be careful that it's not too close to your other self, because then it starts to create almost like a little bit of like a fuzzy effect too. And you don't want that on your skin, right? Like it seems unnatural. So you have to make sure that it feels like very natural and you don't notice it, right? So that's the goal. So I'm just gonna here.
The facial expressions are great.
I don't even notice them. So I'm just gonna play it back real quick. And right off the bat, I mean, that took what, like a few minutes, and obviously I'm talking through it, but pretty simple. I made sure that I was far enough, like I mentioned. Now you could tell that it ended up ending. So I'm just gonna for the out point, in point, out point, and here we go. So now I'm gonna talk about how I adjust the frame so that it's a little bit closer as far as the exposure to the left side, so my sweet side.
One thing I do want to point out too that you took into consideration that I don't think you mentioned is the eye line that you have with each other. And I think with salty self and sweet self, and that's an important, that's a really actually big piece of making sure they feel it feels natural, like you're sitting there having a conversation with yourself. And it's just these subtle looks that you give the chair, your other self, that you've done a really great job with. So maybe just, do you think about that going into the process as well?
I sure do. I love it. Like, I actually want to do a whole conversation with myself, but I know you have to have like those appropriate pauses, and that's definitely a challenge. But like, yeah, I try to think about like, you know, the other person, you know, and just kind of like look over, and I feel like it makes it that much more believable in a sense. Like, even with my cake video, I would like kind of like call the other person in and like laughed as we're eating the cake and like giggled with each other, like as if there's other people there. But it's just me being crazy.
That's amazing. I would do that too.
It's fun, honestly. And so here I tried to make sure that I lined up like around the same time also when I decided where to like start and stop my video. And then I got it in here. So actually it was off a little bit. I wanted it to be where, so you could just scrub through. So where I'm giving a thumbs up, I'm just gonna kind of drag this over, and I think I'm like mad that she got it in, you know? So that's my ending here.
Love that.
Yeah, so we kind of gotta think about those little things, and they end up, you know, really playing out. So let's go back to the mask. Also, what's great, you know, when you're talking about the mask, let's say that like line was a little harsh, you can totally make more points on your mask. You got to make sure it's actually selected. So if you're having trouble, make sure it's selected. You could go in and out. You could add multiple points. When you're using the free draw, you can also kind of like hold it down and like start to create a little bit more of a curve. So there's a lot of ways to work it. And I will definitely show that on my more challenging cake one that I showed you on Instagram. So this one was like actually pretty simple as far as like editing goes.
Yeah, and Fergie, to kind of go back to your question that you had asked before, I think you'll probably get a lot more information on that more advanced masking when we do some of the later editing, because you'll probably be using a lot of that pen tool and some of those handles and things.
I'm just gonna see if I move this. Okay, so here I'm gonna start to bring up the exposure till I feel like for example, if I brought it up to here too, right, you could tell it's like way too much. And I'm going to actually add an adjustment layer onto the whole thing, but I just want to make sure that this is exactly at the same starting point before I do that. So I'm just going to, I think even that's too much. I'm just going to do 0.1 and say.
Yeah, it's almost like you can't really tell unless you're actively looking for it. So it's getting there.
Yeah, I guess let's see if I did 0.2. That's too bright, right?
Yeah, it's like hard. Yeah, it's just that subtle change.
So what I could do also is go back to my mask and even just like maybe bring it over here a little bit more and fuzz it out, feather it out. Actually, I have my own words.
Fuzz it out. I like it.
And that'll help kind of, you know, make it a little softer too. So I think let's see how that looks. Yeah, I don't notice it.
No, much better.
But so I had my exposure set, you know, on my camera, it said it was at 0, but to me, this looks a little dark. So what I'll do is we'll go into my adjustment layer, and I like to use adjustment layers rather than color correcting on, you know, each individual one, which seems just like a lot of work because then you have to copy and paste. And this is just an easy way to apply it to both at the same time.
Yeah. And that's a little antidote there for anyone who is working with clients like Jessica is and like we are. That helps save you a lot of time if you want to send a client a draft or a cut without a color grade on it, or without maybe a sound mix below it. All you have to do is turn that adjustment layer off, as instead of turning every single layer that you've color graded. So it's a huge time saver, and you can continue to just stack these adjustment layers on top of your timeline, so that, you know, you have a color layer, you have a title layer, like all these things, just to really save some time and be as neat as possible.
Yeah, for sure. And also even with your like export settings, right? One of the things I recently learned is actually, I was talking about like warp stabilization, and I learned that you should put it on at the end, because every time it auto saves, it actually adds a lot more data. And so it's like a bigger file that's auto saving, and it ends up being a lot more. So. Oh,
wow.
I want you to notice here, I have some adjustment layers already created, and You'll see one for TikTok, one for Instagram. So I'm just going to drag over the Instagram one here. And we're going to just make some simple ones here, brighten it up. You can use volumetric colors and the scopes. I tend to like things like pretty bright, and obviously just making sure that it's not clipping too much. You'll see that I'm starting to get the back right window is like pretty well lit and starting to get overexposed, but the rest of the image looks good to me. So I'm going to show you actually how to use a mask to take down some of that exposure in that specific area. And that way I'm still able to brighten the entire image and not have that be overexposed. And obviously you can kind of work with the different settings here. So you could bring down the highlights. And so that's going to help with that a little bit. Bring up the shadows. I think it still needs, I hate how my, let's see here.
Would you say your first, when you get into the lumetri color tab or, color grading, would you say your first thing that you look at and is the histogram and is making sure that that exposure is set to where you want it, and then you sort of continue those edits from there?
Yeah, for sure. So if you hit the clamp, it'll tell you your settings and you can choose whatever scopes you'd like and what makes the most sense. I like these three. I feel like they're, a good visualization as far as like the color and the exposure goes. I'd love to hear from anyone else, like what ones you guys use, what makes the most sense for you. So here you're going to see like you want it to be between like 0 and 100 being your like whites and then the blacks on the 0. And you want it to be like a nice balance. It looks like it's clipping a little bit here on the right, which is where my window is, right? So that's where I'll talk about how I use the mask. So I can just make sure that's a little bit darker and not, having the eye go that way too much. You don't want people to be distracted by something that feels like overexposed. So we'll talk about how we can help with that.
Awesome. Yeah, masks are such a powerful way to not only do what you're doing now where you're cloning yourself and creating this amazing, kind of surreal look, but for color grading as well, and creating masks so that you can add different focus, on the parts of the video that you actually want, as opposed to taking the subject out of the frame.
Yeah, there's so much creativity when it comes to videos as far as like color grading, and you can really add your own creative look. And for me, I know a lot of people shoot flat. I actually use what's in camera. I find like the Sony is pretty good. It's like came a long way from where it used to be. And so like, this is basically out of the camera and I'm like pretty happy with it. And so yeah, obviously I would make a few more adjustments, and you kind of look at this and make sure that your color's not coming out of this like little line here, because that would mean that it's oversaturated. I tend to find that a lot of my videos will be like getting pretty close to the reds, because I shoot a lot of food and it's like a lot of like cheeses and like orangey reddish food. So I have to be careful with that. And sometimes like what looks good, on the actual preview and then what you're seeing in the scopes can be different. And I feel like that's a big challenge. So like you have to really find like the perfect balance. And then not to mention that unfortunately, like every single phone looks different too. That's right. True. So you really do want to actually go with these scopes pretty clearly, because otherwise, like when you get to the phone, like what you see on an iPhone versus like a Pixel and Samsung could be totally different.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point. And you can very easily fall into the trap of thinking that your eye knows exactly your eye knows what it wants, but sometimes it's seeing something that doesn't look exactly what the scopes are showing. And even now, after editing for so many years, I still look at the scopes and a clip and I'm like, really? I still have that long that I can push that until I actually overexpose the shot. So it is helpful and it's there for a reason. And so, for those that really want to know a little bit more about color correcting, please ask those questions in the chat, because it's super powerful and it is really important to your final look.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of crazy that I'm going so high with the exposure here, and maybe I'll bring it, but like, I feel like that looks good to me and it is clipping here, but I'm going to show you now how I'll use another adjustment layer. I'm just going to bring it over here. Actually, before I get to that, so just not that it matters, nothing's on there. Obviously there's the creative, and this is like the lookup table. So if you shoot flat, you can get some information there and kind of adjust it. You have the curve. So if I wanted to work and like kind of bring down the highlights and up the shadows here, you can do a lot, kind of like what we were mentioning earlier. There's so many places on Adobe Premiere Pro that you can actually adjust things, especially with color. So you could do it in the curves. Some people, do everything in the basic. Like there's so many different ways you can kind of work with what's there and make a certain look.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's fun to play around with it. And if you've never used the Lumetri color tab, let's just get this chat going here. It's definitely something to just play around with and like push things. Sometimes if you're looking for a more creative look, I like to just push things to their limit to see, what looks good and if it's maybe too extreme. And like you're doing right now, you can play with the saturation, the hue, the luminosity, which is obviously your brightness. So there's a lot of different things you can do in here.
Yeah, and I think you can have fun with it. I tend not to start to mess with colors too much, like just changing the blue. It actually doesn't look like it's doing much. Oh, there you can see it now. You can see it, right? So cool. It's really the hue is what color it's closest to. So you can see you kind of turn the reds to the oranges or more close to the yellows. And then this how saturated it is, right? So if I find that I'm starting to feel like my reds are a little too saturated, I could bring those down a little bit. So you can see the skin tones are usually within this area. So if you have your skin tones are starting to look a little too unnatural, you can kind of play around with that and bring down the saturation slightly.
I love that tool, the color picker too, that eyedropper tool, color picker, whatever the scientific Premiere word is. But
I think picker is the right word.
Picker?
I think.
Yeah, because it really
right? Pointer picker? Yeah,
pointer.
Picker. It's picking the color. I think that's correct.
So Voodoo Val has a great question for you. And just overall, general editing, she wants to know what is the most tedious or difficult part of the process for you, and how do you overcome that part of editing?
That's a great question. And for me, it actually is coloring. I think that sometimes I find that I can't get it to be exactly the way I want, and it'll drive me crazy. This image was super easy. And I think it comes down to when I'm editing some specific dish that has maybe a funky color in it. And I feel like I can't perfect it. Or for example, I was speaking about, taking photos, matching a photo in the video, perfectly can drive me crazy.
Yeah, that's a really tough part of the process as well, I think. And it's frustrating probably because it is that last step, or one of the last steps in the edit, that is that finite, finishing touch that you want everything to look really good. And I think some of the struggles, as an editor as well, are matching cameras maybe. So in color grading, a Sony and a Canon, and they've come a long way. So they're you can match them a lot easier. But I remember trying to match the color profiles of both color grading a shoot or something. And it's very frustrating when you don't have the, white balance set the same. So that's a great question, Val.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is a great question. And I think everyone has the different struggles too. And, I think as far as I've come so far when it comes to quickly editing videos, and now I have I feel because I have a shot list, everything's coming together, and then it's that last part, and I'll spend way too long on it, and then I'll bring it to my phone, and I'm wait, that doesn't look right, and then I'll export 5 versions of the same video, and then I'll post it. I'll be no, it's not perfect. I think as a creator, we always feel there could be something else we could have done.
Yeah. Well, I think a good tip, little pro tip that I've sort of dealt with, and maybe you feel the same way about this, as an editor who's constantly staring at the screen, even the scopes, even in color correcting, it's important that if you're not on a set timeline or deadline, step away from the video for maybe a night, take 24 hours to go do something away from a screen, because sometimes when you come back to it, you realize, oh, okay, I like this look a little differently, or maybe I saturated that too much. And do you feel the same way?
Oh yeah, for sure. Even luckily I had this one client who wasn't on a super deadline, and I couldn't this video, I had so much footage, hours worth. This was more of a full restaurant concept, and this place was beautiful and there was so much food and there was like integration of like us experiencing the restaurant. And I was there for like hours editing. I like stepped away, came back. And then I feel like once I like came back to it, like I just felt like I had a better look. It wasn't even necessarily the color. It was just like the whole entire concept of it, and was able to piece things together a little bit more naturally and find the perfect song. Sometimes it's that too. Like not, if I'm like, that song's just not it, you know, like I have to like find the better song, you know?
Yeah. It's all these little pieces really do. It's part of the process. And that's what makes editing videos so fun and at oftentimes very frustrating, but it's always worth it.
Worth it, guys. All right. So one of the things that you also have is this great, you know, way that you can color match too. So it has a comparative comparison view, and you can kind of look at different clips. And in this case, it doesn't really help because we're basically one clip. But like, for example, if I'm editing something and the exposure change or like the warmth change, like I kind of tweak it and apply the match, and I feel like it does a pretty good job, at least a starting point for me. And it'll adjust the midtones, highlights, shadows, and it'll adjust like where this little thing is in here. So you can notice that it's kind of like changing it a lot. And I find that has saved me in so many circumstances where I feel like I've run into an issue. I'm like, wait, what do I need to do? What is different about this image in comparison to something else? And I could try to show it in another video, which would help a little bit illustrate that more. But this tool has been like something I use all the time. I haven't used that enough, but I've been dabbling in it, and I definitely agree with you that it's a time saver. And I think one of the powerful things about that is you might shoot 5 different clips that are in 5 different locations in a restaurant that you're shooting or something like that, that all have slightly different lighting and maybe some different hues and colors to them. And if you look at the clip on its own, you may say, oh, I want to take this clip and turn it a more like a warmer tone, but everything has to feel consistent in your final edit. So oftentimes the next clip has to match the same tone. And so that's what's, I think, really, really cool about this feature, and something that is important to use if you're trying to make everything feel very consistent. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting even because I shoot at a restaurant, and even within, like if I'm sitting outdoors and there's a slight change, like that could really affect the video within like the same maybe few seconds even. So it doesn't even have to be in a different location. And it's just a small tweak, and it just does a great job at that.
Cool, very cool.
So you can also, like I mentioned, there's so many places you could do different things. As you see, I'm kind of adjusting this up and down. You can adjust it as well. Also, if you wanted to select a color kind of similar to the other way, this is a little bit more specific. You can select, you know, a specific, you know, color within your video and adjust it and so on. So there's a lot of different things you can do here. So let's say if I was happy with this, like, I mean, like I said, I probably would spend a lot more time on this, but I don't want to go too long into that because I just wanted to switching back and forth for a second.
This is the brain of a video editor, by the way. This is just, it's like, oh, I gotta have to do that.
In the effects control, you're going to notice there's a drop down for lumetri color. And so I'm going to go into my basic correction, and I want you to notice that the exposure is at 0.1. And in the cake video that I did, 2 of my videos were shot with a set exposure, and for some reason my camera switched back to automatic for the last one, and I had to make a keyframe so that I can adjust the exposure as it changed in the video. And I was like, oh, when it was happening in the video, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be torturous. And it's actually not. Like, you just make a keyframe. Like, let's say it started to get brighter here, you can just bring that back down to 0, and then it'll automatically adjust for you. So as you can see, so that's a really good tool too. And you could utilize the keyframes here for any of those different features that you would need.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and something that it's a little, you know, like something as little as that detail, but saves the video, so that the whole goal of this video is to fool somebody in thinking that it's just, you know, 2 of you cloned. And if you don't do that, then there's a little bit of a, you know, creative discrepancy that someone might notice. So that's a really cool feature.
Yeah, so luckily for this, it was just that 0.1 of the difference that I feel like saved it. But let's say if there was a change, you can adjust it there. So now I brought on a different adjustment layer, and I'm going to come over and start to bring down the highlights, and it's going to bring down the highlights in the entire video, which I don't want to do. So another use of masks is that you can actually make adjustments on just part of the video. So I'm just going to start my points here, and let's zoom in so we can actually see a little bit better. Oh, that's a great face.
That's a good one.
Let's see here. Okay, so, and this is the pen tool, and if you hold it down, it kind of like helps create like a little bit of a curve. So as you can see, I'm doing that because I want to like be pretty close to this chair here, because that's where the exposure you're seeing it the most, and you could kind of just like follow through. I don't want to get too close to my head, and I'm gonna actually end up probably creating like a little bit of a feather there so it's not so harsh. 50% and just bring it up, make sure I'm not missing anything, and I was. And you want to make sure that you close your mask. Right. And that's not what I wanted to do, but it's pretty flexible, to be honest. Oh, and I keep pressing the same thing. You could be outside of the frame, which is great too. Like you would think you would have to be within it, and you don't. So it just makes it easier. There's my auto save. And so I'm just gonna bring the feathering just a little bit because I don't want it to start to get into, and honestly, if it's bringing down the highlights of my hair, like I don't necessarily mind. And then the expansion just a little bit, and you could kind of move it around, see what works. And obviously as I'm moving, is that gonna move? And what's great is you could see in this frame, it's actually going too much into my hair and my face, right? And I don't want to lose that detail there. So what can I do? There is a mask path, and you can click and toggle that animation so that it's going to move based off of like where you are in that video. So let's say I'm starting at the beginning here, and I want this to be a little bit, just gonna adjust it. And this is where things get to be a little bit annoying, and you have to be a little, it's a little tedious, to be honest. So I'm just going to keep it pretty general and start my mask path there. And one thing that I'll note is that there is the option to track it, and it could track it for you. So it's going to progress it. And like, sometimes this will take a little bit. I mean, hopefully it's not that challenging because there's not too many moving parts. That's when it starts to get really tedious, and kind of what you were mentioning, maybe like you'd need to use a different program to like get that specific edit. But luckily, like it's on a tripod. I'm not really moving that much. Either is the window. So there's a lot less that goes on as far as like having to track it. So I'm just going to stop this because I don't really need it.
Well, that I definitely want to address that point that you just mentioned too about the tripod and like avoiding a lot of things like that. You know, like the masking features are only as efficient as, you know, the pre-production planning that you put into place. And so Voodoo Val actually had a really good question that, you know, what are like some major don'ts that you stay away from so that this process is easier? So is it using a tripod, or are there other techniques that you use that people at home could kind of implement in their work?
I think if you're going to try to clone yourself, like your first time, like 100% you need that tripod. You need consistency as far as like your lighting goes. So if you are using artificial, that's going to be the easiest, I would say. With me, I was mentioning that the light was changing, and I actually had to bring down the blinds, and I rather have my ISO up a little bit higher to adjust for that. And then also not crossing over with your other self, which I'm going to show, and hours of editing. But like, so fun. And this was like a quick edit. Like, I'm just going to toggle on the eye here so you can see it's just like a small thing that's in the back, and I could probably make that a little bit better and bring this down here. But just for like the purposes of that, like you could see that it kind of at least helped. And I can actually bring this up even a little bit more, maybe bring a little bit of white. And then I didn't actually adjust any of the white balance, which I probably should have done. And the easiest thing is that once again, you could use the picker, and I probably should have done this before. I just warmed it up, and I actually think it added a little too red, but you kind of find out. And that's always like, I always say it's a guide. Don't go by it exactly, you know?
Yeah. White balance. I mean, temperature, it's extremely important, but I find that like that becomes a style choice as well. Like sometimes you want something to be warmer than maybe what the white balance should be, or cool something down. So yeah, that's definitely it's a guide. It's a loose guide.
And I think like it's cool to see too, like different people have like their, you know, specific like looks that you'll see on their page, and maybe their stuff is like super warm, or you know, maybe extra blue, and it's kind of cool. I like that.
Yeah.
I find that as a creator in the food space, that it's always been a big challenge of mine to kind of create that specific, like I have a look, but when it comes to like color, like I feel like I can't like have a all like, you know, set where people have like a bunch of pinks or blues or a specific look, because like some are of me in the food, and I'm in like a restaurant, and then all of a sudden I'm in the kitchen. Actually being at home in the kitchen has allowed me to kind of create a little bit more of a repetition. So like when you're looking at my feed, you know, you'll notice like it's like me with like the grays and the whites and the pinks, as you see here.
Right.
So it actually has helped with that. But like when I was traveling in different restaurants, like it was hard for me to like create the like feed that felt like, what's the best word for that?
I like curated maybe, or just,
yeah.
I completely understand that. And I think you do a really great job of, even though you're shooting in all these different places, like still having a look and a style. And I would say, you know, the color is one aspect of your style, but I think your personality, like the humor and the playfulness and this like storytelling, is probably the most recognizable part of that. And so people probably look past, hey, this is a different color because I'm here for like the personality. So that's more important, I think. Right.
I agree. And so here we have the video. I think it's pretty cute. Like I said, like this took me a few minutes to come together, and I was like, oh wow, this was so much easier with 2 of me instead of 3. I can also take this and throw it into my TikTok, and then it would just be, you know, you'd be seeing a little bit more of the ceiling, and I could probably even tighten it a little bit so it's not like too much dead space. And I think that's just like a mental thing, because I'm so used to creating these like close-up videos that was like my challenge with my cake video. It was like I didn't have that much space to work with, but I tried to fit us all in. And then
that would have been so hard if there was a third you in that chair, because like looking at the frame now, it just works so well. Even if there is that dead space, I think it's so important to have that, especially for this like ease of masking the 2 of you out. If you were in that chair, this would be a completely different tutorial.
So I did do it. Let's see if I can find it.
Jake C here in the chat says, even though I already know how to do most of these things, this is still very relatable and enjoyable. I'm glad you think so, Jake.
I love that. Let's see if I can find my other self. As you can see, I like played around with different like ideas, like where I was sitting, like in this case. So that's how I did that. In my original idea with the 3 of me, I decided that I could not be here, because if I was sitting in the chair on the right, that would be too challenging, because then I would be interacting with the third person in the back. So I sat down. As you could see, that would be an easy mask because it's not interacting with the third self.
Gotcha.
Let me scrub through. Here I am. And I was in my robe, like spinning the globe. And it was comical. And I probably would have utilized it, but you're going to notice right off the bat that I actually had the windows open. And this is when the exposure wasn't set right. And I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, between like the right exposure, left exposure, and the top exposure all being different, I was like, not happening. This is not, it's doable, but just a little bit more of a headache when it comes to editing. But so you could totally do it. And in this case, I probably would have moved the chair like to the middle, and I could have totally done that. And it wouldn't have been as hard. Obviously, the more movement, and I tend to move a lot. Like I'm like, you know, with my food, and especially with the cakes, I was like, of course I had to dance around like with my cake. And you're going to see in the next example that like the more I move, the more I have to edit. So next time I know I'm just gonna sit there and eat my cake still. But like here it was pretty simple because it was, you know, 2 separate people like left, right. There was no interaction as far as like me crossing over. So it was a straightforward mask, I would say.
Now a question for you. Do you, in this framing specific for this video, did you try other parts of your the space that maybe didn't work as well, or was this the section of the house that you kind of wanted and you designed it that way specifically for this video?
So originally I was thinking about being at the kitchen table, which is where I shot the cake, and I decided to kind of like switch it up because I was thinking about like watching a movie. So I wanted to have the idea of like on the couch. The light is coming from like, I mean, we have like light coming from a lot of different angles, but this was kind of nice, like light coming onto the scene. There's still a little backlit. And then I made sure to like prop it. And to be honest, like this is annoying me. I should have had the chair more in the middle to like balance it a little bit, but you don't want it to feel super staged either. So it has to have like a little bit of a nice balance. But you can see my little egg chair in the back here.
I actually liked, I was going to comment on the fact that you could have very easily pulled the egg chair out, you know, and then you have nothing behind it, which maybe in initial thinking is like, okay, it's cleaner that way. But I like the fact that it's back there because it's not symmetrical to what you're shooting, but it gives more personality and depth too. I think that's an important part to hit on. You know, everything that we've watched so far that you have has depth and life to it. And I think that's because you're creating this depth of field, right? Like you're creating movement and you're creating space between you and the background.
Yeah, for sure. And I felt like it did feel a little sad without something back there. So I kind of put that there. Yeah. I mean, I wanted like a little burst, and I think that the pinks are kind of like working all together. So you'll notice I have like the pink here, and this like a darker one. So kind of like the colors going in uniform and feeling like kind of my personality, I guess, as like I wanted to like showcase and have a little bit of a balance as far as the frame went.
I have another question here from Sliman. Forgive me if I pronounced your name wrong. I apologize.
Hi.
This is a good question and something I'm curious about. They are asking, can you change the camera in Premiere Pro? Basically, not just zooming in or out, but totally change the camera view. So this is obviously how you shot this clip. Can you change the view of a camera if you're not on a Z space, or is there something that you can do, or is that more of an After Effects thing?
I don't know what you mean. I'm sorry.
I think I'm gonna clarify it. I think basically, rather than just moving on the XY axis, if you're talking about changing a camera view, I'm assuming it's 3D space that they're referring to. So that, let's say they don't, the camera angle that you shot, maybe they'd want to change it a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and answer that one, Sliman, because I think that we've gone over a lot of the motion properties, the scale properties, obviously, and the position properties are how you would change that shot on an X and Y axis. But if you're looking to change, like the Z space and going into more 3D space, you can do that, but that would require you to take the clip into Adobe After Effects.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too familiar with how to do that. I mean, you could always like add a 3D like effect and like tilt things if you needed to, but for the most part, I have the flexibility as far as like moving in a little bit if I wanted to tighten the shot, but
and because you shot in 4K too, I'm not sure if you're just joining the stream now, but Jessica was telling us that she shot and shoots everything in 4K, and that allows her, with that resolution, to essentially have two different camera angles if she chose to punch in on one of her other selves here. So there are ways to do that.
And I would have to be pretty strategic to make sure that like it felt like all of a sudden it would probably just take up the entire frame of like a weird face that I was making as I finally got the popcorn in.
Right.
So the last step in this situation would be finding the perfect song. I used Epidemic sound, but actually I think they have like the option here too, where you can find songs here, and I found one, so I'm just gonna kind of play this one that I found, and just give me 1 second.
The fact that audio is linked to Epidemic sound in the Essential Sound tab blew my mind. I literally found this out on the last stream that I did, and I was editing, and someone's like, that you can pull audio in right through your audio tab.
Right? It's a relatively new thing, I think.
I think so. Yeah. I was like, wow. Okay.
So here's my keyboard shortcut, Shift I to get to the beginning. And I'm just gonna tilde so that it's just taking up the entire screen and we can listen and watch. And honestly, I probably would have like shortened that. It's 17 seconds, way too long. Like nobody needs to see me throwing popcorn and candy into my mouth for that long. So yeah, I'd probably make that
so
like
playful.
Yeah, and it's fun. And I feel like I could just take this entire thing, throw it into my other timeline for TikTok. I wouldn't include the music. I'd probably select the music specifically within the app there. I think that's probably really important. The only time I ever use the audio as far as TikTok goes is for a voiceover. Otherwise, and even with a voiceover, I usually select a different song and like just put the audio all the way to 0. It's like a searchable thing. So I think you want to be strategic with that if you're posting on that platform.
That's a very good point.
So one of the other things I wanted to mention, so
I love that video is just on a tripod and like it's so enjoyable to watch. Like it's just very, I think going over what you went over yesterday is so different than what this is, in terms of the style, because there were so many different cuts and so many different actions and movement, and like it just kind of captivated you right away. And I think this is captivating in a different way because you thought out, okay, like this is a really interesting and fun idea. And so you let the action and the simple edit really speak for itself.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that it's very intimidating when you hear cloning yourself. Like you're like, no way, there's no way that's going to be a simple edit. And, the more you do things, it seems like to get obviously easier. And I realized like once I watched a few videos on how to do it, I was like, wow, this is actually not that hard.
Yeah.
Especially after, I'm going to make the like relation to like going down a black diamond. And then you're like, that's how you start when you're snowboarding. And then you're like, wait a second, like, now you go to like a blue or whatever they call it. I haven't snowboarded in a few years, but that's where I started. I started down a black diamond and I was like, well, that's kind of where I felt like when I started with that cake video of 3 of me and they all interacted with each other. And that's how I started masking. So now when I go to this, I'm like, well, that was simple. It seems too easy. Like what else do I have to do? But not all of editing has to be super complex. It could be fun, easy, and simple.
Yeah. Well, sometimes if you're overly ambitious, it's often a good thing because it forces you to learn these techniques like trial by fire. I'm figuring them out because I've already done it. And then now you know it and now you're like teaching it here. So I think it's worked out for you pretty well.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun, honestly. Even like the tedious stuff, like when you finally get it, I feel like there's such a sense of accomplishment, and you're like so proud of yourself. It's like when you make yourself like a dinner and it's probably not that good, but you made it and it's like, yeah, it's great.
Yep, totally.
So I'm going to show you like a little quick tip as far as if you have something like a crumb, and I couldn't find it, but this is just a video where I was like dumping the butter into the KitchenAid. I'm just going to drag this out. I'm going to unlink it here so I can show you and just delete the audio for a second. And this isn't something I would actually do because the clip itself would probably be tightened in to like not even show this. But let's say I didn't like this like reflection here. I felt like it was distracting. I could just zoom in a little bit so I'm seeing a closer look here. Okay. And I'm going to hold Alt down and drag this up and it's going to create another layer. And you can use the opacity. I'm just going to drag this down here. Sorry, I'm going to go back to like 50% so you can see a little bit more of what I'm doing here. And you're just going to draw a circle or whatever shape you want to use here. Just be pretty close to whatever it is that you want to get rid of. I think we discussed a little bit yesterday. It's like when it comes to editing a photo and if you don't like something, it's so simple, right? Like I can't wait till we get to that point in like video editing where you have a heal like function and you could just like get rid of it. But this is a little hack that I learned. Like if I have a crumb or something like on the table that I don't like, and I sometimes I have to like play around with it. I just press invert and then you move the bottom one a little bit. So I'm just gonna have to play around with that. And then once again, go back to the top and you could feather a little bit. Did you get that or did I say that too fast?
No, I got that. So you're basically moving, you're moving the bottom layer out of the top mask essentially, right?
Yeah, so I'm masking and I masked a specific point and you want to be pretty close to like what's happening there. So I'm just gonna Control Z again. And so I have my mask. You can see where it is. It's inverted and I'm gonna draw, feather it a little bit. You can expand it. And because I have something above it, when I go to the bottom layer, I actually wanna move it up a little bit and you could kind of play around and see what makes the most sense. But I just feel like in general, I think I can still see it. So I'm gonna feather it a little bit more. But I feel like that looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's just like a simple little hack that I learned that someone was utilizing on like the ocean and they got rid of a person. And I was like, well, I could use that in like my food videos if there's something distracting, and you could really utilize it anyway, just to get rid of something like that's feels like a little point of distraction. And like, maybe it's in the corner. And in this case, like I said, I'd probably just tighten in the shot anyway, but.
Now, if you had another, let's say you had 2 crumbs where you made a mess and there's a bunch of crumbs, would you duplicate that layer again, or would you just mask on top of that exact layer? So you basically have like 2 masks at once. I guess you could, right?
Yeah, you could do multiple masks. And I mean, I think like, I almost think like 2 crumbs is better than 1 because it's like that 1 crumb that annoys me. But if it feels like it's a little messy all over, then it's okay. But yeah, when it comes to masking, like you can really kind of have fun with it and like, just like clean it up. But the thing is that was important here is that, hey, this actually wasn't on a tripod. So let's say if I play it, let's see if it gets messed up. No, it's pretty still.
That's pretty stable.
Yeah, he was definitely holding it. I could tell a little bit, but yeah, just dropping it in. So if there is movement, once again, you will have to mask the path and like make sure you like tweak it a little bit so that it doesn't feel like, oh, why is there this weird circle moving all of a sudden on the video?
Right. Yeah, and I mean I feel like we're hitting that a lot, but it's really important, especially in masking these things, to save your mental state. Just shoot things on a tripod if you know you're going to be doing a lot of masking, because it will save you hours of time.
Yeah. And honestly, like this isn't something that I necessarily thought I would have to do mask. And then, like I said, I probably wouldn't. I just wanted to showcase it. But like when you're cloning yourself, 100% tripod, right? Yep. Like I feel like that's just gonna make your life so much easier if you're starting it off. I mean, I haven't experimented without it right now, but I think that would be a lot more challenging. But yeah, you could utilize masks in so many different ways. And that was just like a simple way to kind of clean it up. It's like your little healing function.
Yeah, exactly. The video healing brush.
Awesome. I do want to get into, so we're at 423 and I have like masking of video and a photo, and I just will show that, but I think we'll have, if we have time, we'll go to this at the end.
Sure.
It was just like a cute little thing where you can have like a photo or another video, and then all of a sudden it like zooms into something.
Love that.
I feel like a lot of travel people in the space will do that with like sunglasses or something, like to get from one place to another.
Brands love that stuff. So,
so I'm going to close this.
Sliman has I'm going to turn this into a question, even though it's not a question, but while we're talking about video editing, because you're the pro on this, it looks like he's looking for maybe some recommendations on a bigger monitor or an editing, specific laptop or computer. What do you use so that your computer can just, rip through these videos? And you don't have to share it, but just thought I'd throw it in.
I'm gonna like look at it like MSI A750 GF.
Okay, cool. It's just a lot of letters. Perfect.
Yeah, I used to edit on the laptop, and let me tell you, that was a challenge. So we've upped it a little bit, but I'd love to know what people are editing on now.
Yeah, Jake, it seems like you're pretty active in the chat and you have some knowledge of that. Maybe throw a little recommendation for some solid either laptops or desktop computers for editing. I mean, they're getting so crazy fast that it's important to have something that you can edit all this 4K footage with.
Yeah, and I have to say that my partner in our brand Cheat Day Eats, Mr. Cheat Day Eats, he has an IT background, and like it's so nice to have like someone who's so technical with that. And he's like that person who's like, this is the, computer we're gonna get, and the monitor.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes.
Do it.
Yeah. And I've become technical on like the editing process, but when it comes to that stuff, I'm like, yeah.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
it's good to know.
Totally.
So here is the free cake video. And I wanted to show this because I think it's really more advanced as far as the masking. And like you mentioned, sometimes it gets pretty complex. And when it does, maybe this isn't the best. And you just have to be pretty specific with it. But I'm just going to scrub through really quickly.
Awesome.
So there's...
continue getting what you...
Sure.
I'm just going to answer. This Voodoo Val was asking me what I'm using, just so I don't forget that question. I am just using a MacBook Pro Retina display from like 2019 or 2018, and it's a really great kind of like beefed up laptop. And I have a Dell monitor at home when I am home that I'm using as my other monitor, because editing on a laptop is great, but like you said, it's a lot easier to have a secondary monitor if you can. And it's just great for seeing the beautiful work that you create on a larger monitor.
And so you travel, right?
I do, yeah. So we traveled, I would say like 6 months out of the year, and we just bought a house in May. So we wanted to
Congrats.
Thank you. And we wanted to take a bit of a step back, and we still travel, but I now have a home studio, and I'm not home right now. I'm in New Hampshire. So this is literally a curtain, and we're looking out on the White Mountains, and it's beautiful fall color. So it's
I'm so jealous. Yeah, that's my goal for this fall. I hope I may get it there. So have the leaves changed there?
They're starting to. We were in the Adirondacks the other night, and we drove through Vermont, and they're like certain high peaks, they're starting to change. And where we are now, it's like spots of green, but peak color is like right around the corner. It's beautiful.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel exciting. Like we were in Miami last winter, but I had to like come back for like the summer in New York and like the fall. Like I love it.
It's the best. There's just some, I was talking to somebody today, and earlier today I was at the Freiburg Fair in Maine. I don't know if anyone in the chat is familiar with Freiburg, Maine, but there's this huge agricultural county fair every year in the fall. And it was the first time we went, and it was like a step back in time, and the smell of, all the bad food. Like I was thinking of you actually as we were there, because there was all like this funnel cake and all the, cheat foods. The good stuff.
Yeah. It's hard when, when you're traveling, you don't want to miss a meal,
Yep.
I feel like that's something like, you're like every day you're like, I have to get all of the great eats. Like I can't eat a salad. I'll eat a salad when I get home.
Yep, exactly. Voodoo Val, you had asked us both. Sorry, I know I want to get into this. We're
no, you're good. Minutes. I like the questions.
Is there a piece? Yeah, she's
amazing question. So
yeah, keep them coming. Is there a piece of tech that you use, be it a peripheral computer tech, camera, or side tool, that you can't live without? That's a great question. Ooh, I'll let you go first. Piece of tech that you can't live without, and I might know the answer.
I mean, I would say my camera. So the A7S III and the G Master 2470 is like my go-to gear. I'm absolutely obsessed with it. They're like my baby, and I would say that sounds really sad, but it's true.
Nope, not sad at all. I agree. Like I said, I'm a Canon guy, so I have a couple different Canon cameras that I really can't live without, and get to create what we do here. And I would say that, and maybe as nerdy as it sounds, my hard drives. Like I have a lot of solid state drives that I travel with that are extremely small. I had one really close by, but I would say your question before, Sliman, about gear, I'd say investing in a really good solid state drive, or something that you can use as your workhorse if you have a laptop, would be great. Okay, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. I'm just gonna do like a pretty rough cut for this, because this is the one I was mentioning. I'm just gonna show you, like I chose 3 different clips here. There's 3 different me's. There's the one on the left, which is and I'm gonna go like kind of speaking in regards to like the cake. This is a red velvet giant cupcake. This is the rainbow one, and then this is a strawberry crunch. So like I kind of did the same thing. Like I had a concept of like everyone would have its own personality, and that's why I chose that cake. So here's the other one, kind of same thing, like matching as far as like aesthetic, and then here was like the rainbow idea in the middle. So I shot the rainbow one first, and then I shot this strawberry one, in which both were actually filmed at a set exposure, which I mentioned earlier is super important when you're doing the cloning. I don't know what happened with this last guy, but it changed a lot. And when you see them all together, you're going to see that. Actually, you can see that right there. As I jumped up, like it changed the exposure. So unfortunately, it somehow went back to automatic and kind of messed me up a little bit. But that's okay. So let's get them all up at the same time. So now I'm going to start masking. And here we go. And I would say with this one, I didn't do this at first. And I mean, this is where it starts to get really important, that you are specific with where you are. I'm just going to do a really quick, like,
sure.
Box edit for a second for the mask, just to show you kind of how it looks.
The rainbow attire with the rainbow cake. Just no detail goes unnoticed.
Let's see. What am I doing here? Where is that one? Okay. So even something as simple as that, like I saw it right off the bat, like when I just like looked at it. Right. So like you want to be very specific, because once you're not, then you have to start moving things around. One of the things that I'm trying to call out the things that I did wrong, just so you see it and you learn from my mistakes, but I had the cake a different angle, and like I had to like mask even something as simple as that. But it's really, okay. So just gonna, sorry, I'm talking. It's actually pretty hard to talk and do this edit at the same time.
It is. Yeah. It's there's another thing you can learn, just how to explain my edit while I'm editing.
Okay, so here are the three of me. And what I wanted to say is that you want to line up like the specific moments as far as when one's being introduced to the other, because once you start masking and then you change that, you have to redo everything. And so I had to be very specific, and I wasn't at first. And that's where I felt like I started to run into a lot of issues. Like, you know, okay, well now I'm changing where that video is coming in. Well, then I have to readjust because the other person, my other self, is moving differently at that point, but the mask is already set there.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So you had to be pretty specific. So I'd rather just try to get like that in first. Let's see. So I'm just going to get this one actually to start a little bit earlier. So
which cake was your favorite?
The strawberry crunch, for sure. So let's see. So this is where it starts to get like a little tedious, and you have to figure out, okay, so see how I'm like waving at the person on the right?
Yep. So
that's where I need to make sure that this person's coming in. Let's see if I got that. Even a little earlier. So you got to play around with the video to make sure that when they're coming in, that makes the most sense. And that's why I did the rough mask here, just to get the alignment of the videos first. And I see how I'm like, my face is like, oh, she popped up. So I have to kind of line up this one now to when I pop up.
Yeah, that's a good point too. You like the timing. Focus on the timing of it first before you really get into the actual nitty gritty of the masking, so that you make sure everything's aligned the way you want it to with the actions, right?
Yeah, otherwise it gets to be too much. And I actually have my masks wrong, so I'm just gonna say that right off the bat because I did this too quickly, but this one should be on the bottom because I should be alone in the video first. So I wanted that one to be on the bottom first, but I could rearrange that and like get more into the masking once I have like my actual points. Okay, so you want to just give me a minute and maybe
Sure.
you want to go into
Yeah, let's now James is at the end of the timeline. Not sure what that means. Food Val says the traveling rule is on vacation, never go for food you can get back home. I completely agree, Val. We're big foodies over here, and when we travel, I find that I'm constantly making excuses of which restaurants to go to, even though I'm like, no, we can't. We need to save money. But then I eat all the good food, and it's always worth it. It's how you experience traveling personally.
Yeah, I agree.
Agree.
What's your favorite places? If anyone wants to in the chat, or James, for places to eat?
Oh God, that's a tough one. I mean, I'm a Jersey guy. I'm from New Jersey, so I'm an Italian who loves big Italian meals. Anything with pasta is pretty much my go-to. So I don't know. I
have to agree with that. Yeah. Where in Jersey?
North Jersey, Bergen County.
Oh, I'm in West New York, New Jersey.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's where I grew up, and we actually just bought on the western side of New Jersey. So,
well, if you have any recommendations.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area. The food's a little different than the Bergen County, New York scene, but it's we're actually where I need to get my good food in, because in what's today, Wednesday, Thursday. So in 2 days, we're going on a 3-day backpacking trip up in the mountains here. So we will not be eating very good food for 3 days. So I got to sneak it all in before I basically eat like no food.
Sorry guys, I'm gonna bring that back up. I am getting mixed up on my clones here. Hold on a second.
While we have a second, I just want to let anyone in the chat know who does not know this already. Adobe Max is quickly approaching on October 26th through the 28th. It's something that I will be a part of as well. I'll be hosting a couple sessions, some video sessions on the 28th, and it's going to be an amazing time. It's a virtual live stream, which I believe they did last year, but another year of some amazing sessions. My wife is actually hosting a session as well, Anna McNaught. For those that have been on the stream, you guys probably know who she is, and I'm very excited to check that one out. So yeah, for those in the stream, Adobe Max, do not miss it. It's an amazing show. I've attended numerous times and I still love it. So it's fun, and the fact that it's free and everybody can watch it is a huge bonus, because it's normally not. So
I think for timing wise, I'm just gonna deal with the two right people just to show you a little bit more about how I ended up feeling like there was a little bit of a issue as far as making it a little bit harder for myself.
Okay.
So here I am waving, so therefore I need to be walking into the frame. You could tell right off the bat that even though I had the set exposure, this one was a little bit darker. So I'm just gonna go to my color and just bring that up a little bit. And I did have to adjust that slightly. And also one of the things that would make my life easier too is bringing this up and not having it hit the bottom, because it was a little darker. And so just kind of aligning it with the bottom of the cake made things just a little bit simpler. And same thing, actually, I'm just gonna bring this down. You could see.
Yeah, and then I guess another super nitpicky point is, any reflective surfaces that you have, which here maybe the counter, and you have the microwave where you're getting some reflections in, those things. Not that you have that issue here, but it's always good to kind of be aware of those things.
Oh, for sure. Actually, what I ran into an issue, what ended up having to me redo the whole thing, is there was a reflection in the microwave.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think it's one of the most important things when you get to this point in the masking process is here in this specific edit. What happened was, I was mentioning earlier, is that I was moving around so much that you could see, let's zoom in here, and the crossover, right? So my two selves were crossing over. Of course I had to have this big sleeve on too, right? So I needed to decide, well, which one is going to be slightly forward, right, in each edit. And I had to follow through with each one of my mask path. in this situation, I found that like trying to use the track was not helpful. So I had to go into each individual frame and make the decision. So for example, if I start to mask it here, right, I would go in frame by frame and start to kind of like pull. And I know a lot of people utilize the pen tool, but honestly, I feel like this basically does the same thing. And I would kind of just like move it in and out. And I made the decision that the right Jessica, the one with this cake, would be the one that's like in front or dominant. So I had to make sure that I followed through. So then I would have to literally go into each individual one. And so what I was mentioning earlier was that the thing that I ran into as far as issue was that like, when I started to really move around, like it felt like you would see that specific like mini line in the video. So you have to be really very specific with like with the sleeve and having that be in front of the rainbow outfit and like just keep moving it in and out. You could see like, right. So it's like this. So then I would make another key frame and then go to the next frame. Like it got tedious. And then, so for example, if I decided like, well, I want them to eat the cake at the same time, now I have to readjust it. And it began to be like, okay, well, if I have to have them readjust it, and look what happened with my head.
Oh, wow.
So it seemed like a big issue, but it's, you know, it's not. I just had to move it in and like, it ended up, so you have to be really specific with it. And that's where I felt like this is totally doable. And I did it. And it took me hours, but like I got it. And I felt like I was like, okay, well, after this, I know that there's only going to be 2 of me from now on, or I'm going to be like extremely separated from myself. But I feel like there's the little details that you don't necessarily think of when you're first starting off with like cloning yourself, and you have to like, you'll end up seeing it you'll learn from your mistakes. But I thought it was really cool how like, it almost did seem like there was 3 of me, and this person on the right was, you know, just in front of the other one as like she was moving around. So I would just go in frame by frame. So once again, you can try using the mask path, you can use the masking feather, and you can actually use the keyframes here. So for example, in maybe one part, you want the feather to be more than another. As I mentioned earlier, if I start to do the expansion, obviously that's not going to work here, right? I was able to utilize that feature in the other video because the 2 of me were so separate, and it really just kind of made it softer on the couch. Well, who cares? But you know, the couch is soft anyway. You don't notice that detail. Here, you're going to notice it. So I had to be very specific with just a small amount of feathering. I didn't use the expansion in other areas. I was able to. And so I had to go in each individual time and just make sure the timing was perfect. And that's why I tried to do the rough mask just to see where everyone was at the same time, and then go back in and do your actual mask and really make the decision first. So you can do like a rough edit, I would say, to start if you're going to have something where there's multiple of you, and make that decision of like, this is exactly how the video is going to be at each point, and then move on to like starting to mask, because you don't want to run into that issue where you spent all that time creating those keyframes just to realize that the videos don't line up perfectly.
Yeah, that's a complete time sink, and one that has happened, and it will happen to people doing this, but not if you're watching the stream, because now you know what to avoid. But yeah, they all like amazing points. And really, I think one of the things that's like continuing to blow my mind in watching this process is just how complex, even though watching it back seems very seamless, because you've done such a great job doing it, like the complexities of what you need to think about when going into creating something like this, from the pre-planning, from making sure things are on a tripod, making sure the exposure is all correct. If you're using artificial light, in this case, you know, you're using natural light. So like making sure that those things add up, and there's constantly issues along the way, which you're sort of working through.
Yeah. And actually, so I used multiple masks. I should have had the other program pulled up, but you could see I probably picked up that cake, not even thinking about it. So if you take a look here, and then I moved it.
Yeah.
And so like, I actually had to add another masks just to make sure that it was consistent. Because obviously that's like a specific thing that like my eye went to as soon as I started playing. I do want to kind of go over a little bit about like changing the exposure too. So if you need to, let me just make sure.
Yeah, so we have about 10 minutes.
Okay.
So you use that time however you feel like you want to use it. I am enjoying just being a spectator. And any more questions in the chat, continue to feed them. Like I said, here we have about 10 minutes left, and keep on going.
Yeah, so I actually want you guys to take a look at what issue you will run into if you don't use the set exposure, because as you'll notice is I have it here at 0.3, and that's this left Jessica, the red velvet. And if I start playing, the video starts to get darker. What can you do in that situation? You're just going to go to your effects panel, and then you're going to go down to Lumetri color, and you're going to drop down your basic correction, and you're going to select your exposure, and you're going to toggle your animation and bring that to the beginning, because at that point it felt like it was pretty similar to the other frames, which is good. And then you're going to play, and then as you start to see it get darker, we could play around with it. So let's say I want to do 0.5. Sometimes it seems like much more dramatic than it really is, right? It's like 0.5 and that was it. So it's just 0.2 more, but obviously that made a big difference. So you can I actually had to do that like a few times throughout the video. So if you run into that issue, there's always, it's actually continuing to get darker, right? So I'm just going to 0.7, let's see how that is. Maybe 0.8.
Yeah, it's so subtle, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, and like once again, you could see like the really harsh line down here. So as I mentioned earlier, I would actually bring the mask up so that it's in line with the table and not going straight down. Obviously here too, like there's straightening that needs to happen, and it's fine. You could actually do that later, because you just copy the settings and apply it to all of the other videos, and it'll correct it all, because it was on a tripod. So for that reason, like you wouldn't have to do each individual clip. You could just paste all of those settings onto each one, and it would just fix all of the problems and align them perfectly.
Awesome.
Yeah, so let's see here. So now I feel like that's a little harsh too. So you can actually go back to like the mask and like, feather it out a little bit so that it's not so bad. And I think that helps a lot. So I think feathering is your friend.
Feathering is your friend. That's what we're taking from this stream.
Yeah. Okay, so you can see how all of a sudden now it's bright again. So I'm like, wow, that's too much. So then I'm gonna bring that down to like 0.2. Let's see if that works pretty well. So I was like so nervous when I first saw that, like all of that planning and execution, and now I can't do it. But then I was like, wow, that's such an easy fix. So yeah, kind of made it fun.
Oh, that looks great. Slimon in the chat is asking, is it helpful to use a green separator in between to avoid any reflections?
Yeah, I've saw that on a few videos. So I think that would be something I would be investigating in the future just to see. But I think that this worked pretty well. I think next time I'll make sure my exposures are the same. But I think if you're outside and there's a lot more variables, then that is something you'll want to utilize if you're trying to create it.
Definitely. No, you've done such a great job here. And I think that's a great question. Just any number of these things can be used to pre-plan out what you're trying to do. And overall, your goal is to make something that looks seamless and doesn't take you longer than it has to. So whether it's a green tissue or something, or even if you had like markers on the floor in the kitchen of like where each individual was going, and then you tested them out, then that helps too. But there's a number of different ways you can pre-plan it, and it seems like you've done a really great job, even just getting to this point.
Yeah, and this was like my first time using a mask, so I think like I knew like I was these certain things that I wanted to do, and what I did the first few times we started was just stay in the same outfit, and I like was standing in each place, and then I took the stuff to the computer, put it on there, like let me test it out, and I could see where I was. But I didn't account for my my little wiggle in the cake, and then that really like threw a wrench in the process. But like I said, I think it was you know, a good use of like really helping me understand masking and how much you can use the markers and really fine tune the details to make sure that it seems seamless.
Absolutely.
So let's see. Yeah, I think, I mean, that was basically it. I think it was a matter of just like fine tuning it, making sure that this person was the person that was more in front, being very specific. Like I said, I would go in and like actually create the mask so that it was like lining this cake so that you wouldn't see the harsh line. Because obviously you could see up here, it seems pretty consistent with the lighting, but down here it wasn't. And then I would color the whole thing at once, which was nice. I could just, you know, take my adjustment layer, drag it over, make one, you know, batch color and whatnot. And because I made all those individual edits beforehand, it would look, you know, seamless.
Awesome.
So once again, that was the final video here. And I will definitely include more like of the cloning examples now into my videos, because I feel like it just kind of adds like a fun, different element.
I love it. It's so cool to see the finished product too, and really see it, you know, in looking at what you did with your, you know, little color correction earlier, you definitely do have a style, and it's this bright and like airy, warm, you know, fun style. So it all definitely comes through in your account and your work.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think you can utilize like some of the things I've talked about today and really apply it. Like, so realizing that you can create a mask, like similar to what you would do in Photoshop or Lightroom, where you're like specifically, you know, I think when it comes to, especially like for food or probably styling anything really, right? You want to think about what's that subject, what is the eye drawn to? And so how can you do that in a video? And I think masking is a great way to like really highlight that specific dish, right? So you want to maybe add a little bit of more brightness or sharpening or whatever it is to that dish. You can just use a mask and only create it on that part of the video and have it mask around there and move. And that way your eye's drawn to it too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think masks in general, or at least maybe that's the way I used to think about masking, was just to take something away and to really like fix something that I didn't do right in the, you know, the first place. But masking is so much more than that, as we've seen today with you working on different, you know, color grading methods and adding things and creating specific vignettes around a certain product or a, you know, a piece of food that you want to stand out. So they're endless of what you can do with them.
For sure. I think that it's been like fun learning and kind of figuring out how I could use them and like make my videos better. So if anyone has any questions,
just have hi Jermaine. The first and only comment I've seen from Jermaine, but thank you for being engaged, says that's the first time I've seen a cupcake shaped cake. I love that.
I know, I love it too.
There's a first for everything. And honestly, thank you for sharing your methods with us. I think it's amazing, as a bunch of people have been saying in the chat today, like to be able to learn from somebody who's been doing this for so long. And even as a video editor and professional myself, I'm constantly learning from people like you and just other creators. And it's such a fun collaborative way to get pointers and see what everyone else is doing.
Thank you. Yeah, I honestly, I love sharing. I feel like when it comes to being a content creator, I think my mentality is just passing along the information that I've learned, you know, whether it be from other creators or YouTube or whatever. And I think, you know, I feel like there's so much to learn and there's so many creative eyes out there, and seeing how other people do it and like letting that inspire you, however it is. And I feel like for me, I've seen a lot of people do the cloning thing, and thinking about like, how can I make it my own is really exciting. And I think that's what I want to like put out there. Like, this is my way of doing it. Like, I want to see yours. So if anyone, you know, goes and clones something, like definitely tag me. I'd love to see whatever it is that you're creating.
I love that. And I really do believe that like this whole world is collaborative and should inspire everybody else. I know I'm inspired and fired up. And thank you again, Jessica, for coming on the stream, for being here. Thank you to those in the chat. And as we close out here, just a quick little housekeeping item. Please stay tuned for the XD Daily Creative Challenge replays with Alize Todd, followed by Draw Along with Kyle T. Webster. And once again, thank you everybody for joining us on day 2 of Adobe Live. Again, my name is James Bonanno. We were joined today by Jessica Hirsch, Cheat Day Eats, and we will see you guys soon. Take care.
Thank you.